What if you went to the doctor for a routine checkup and the doctor said, "Here are your blood pressure results," and then said, "Well, those are at least the patient blood pressure results. Those are the ones we give you so as you don't worry your pretty little head about how things are going. We also have something called the real blood pressure results, and that goes into your chart." That's what the other doctors and I discuss when we're talking about how healthy you are. I will also be sharing this with your cardiologist. By the way, according to this, you definitely need a cardiologist. What if I were to tell you that that's the way that American presidential election results are normally given to the public? 95% of the time, you don't get the real blood pressure results, you get the patient blood pressure results. So you don't worry your pretty little head about how things are going. My name's Chris, and on my channel, I remember things because someone has to. How's everyone doing? It is December. You can see we have a little bit of holiday joy going on with the decor here, and I'm about to sprinkle a little bit more joy over your holiday season by reviewing some election data from the last few decades. It is every boy and girl's greatest holiday fantasy to delve into a bit of election data. And some of the good news on that front is that there is going to be some math, but it's largely kind of middle school level math at its most challenging. Hopefully this won't be too painful. I have a little bit of an example that I put together for you, which I hope you'll find to be lighthearted. And we can hopefully have as much fun with this as is humanly possible, which is to say a very small amount of fun. As it happens, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship and be the first kid of my family to attend college. And I went to an elite university where I ended up with a political science major with a specialization in comparative and developmental politics. This led me to a career in doing a lot of socioeconomic research. I spent the large part of a couple of decades doing a lot of very large socioeconomic data projects for both the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector, and dealt with, in some cases, databases I created or headed a team creating of, in some cases, in the low millions of data points over time series in a variety of social and economic statistics. I have been elected twice in Philadelphia County. The county is concomitant with the city of Philadelphia. As an election day official, I've served as both an inspector of elections and judge of elections in a total of, I believe, 16 elections between primaries and general elections. I have also been an international election monitor. I am currently registered with the ODIHR to do international election monitoring in Europe and Asia. And I've worked in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I did monitor an election in Honduras, and in general, I think I have a fairly good background for this sort of thing. But you don't really need that. I could be some kid putting these numbers out in front of you, and you should probably take them pretty seriously because it gives you a pretty radically different picture of what you are presented as to what the presidential election results are. We're going to discuss undervotes, and to a lesser extent, we're going to discuss something called total vote count. Undervotes is a standard term in the literature, and total vote count less so. And in fact, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need the term total vote count at all, because just like blood pressure and real blood pressure, you would hope that the vote count would be the total vote count and that you wouldn't need, in a dystopian Orwellian fashion, well, there's the total vote. Oh, you wanted the total. You wanted the total vote count. Oh, you didn't say that. So we'll get into that. One of my all-time favorite classic works is the book classic, and I'll put some information on it on the screen, How to Lie with Statistics. The premise of the book isn't that somebody's just going to pick the wrong numbers and lie to you. You don't need a book to spot that, or you don't need a book to instruct you on how you could go about trying to do that if you did have a negative aim in mind. The premise of the book is that there are ways that you can manipulate the framing, the couching, the context of data, the display visually of that data in such a way that you can use the real numbers and still effectively lie to people or give them a misimpression of what the numbers mean. I believe that about 25%, let's say, of what I am going to display to you is along those lines, depending on the exact phrasing that an outlet uses. The bigger problem is that probably a good 75% or more of what I'm going to discuss is indisputably people mixing and matching data sets where they are outright just lying. They are picking numbers that do not go together, that are not compatible. They're doing math off of this figure over here when they should be doing math with that figure over there. There's kind of two varieties of lying with the data here, and one of them is just plain old-fashioned lying. I know that commenters are going to add 15 or 20 different entire series of issues with American elections in general and presidential elections specifically, which are not covered in this video. I am neither naive nor stupid enough to think that there's this one issue with election results. It's taken us far too long to get here already. Where is here, you may ask? Oh, here is Anytown. Anytown, USA. That's any town in the great state of West Montucky, USA, to be more specific. And we're going to zoom in to Anytown, to John Q. Slave Driver Memorial High School. Yes, we all know Slave Driver High. It's the home of the Fightin' Slugs. I think they're going to take regionals this year. With the way that kid's slinging the ball around, I think they're going to beat Central and finally make it all the way to state. Let's say it's early in the junior year school term at Slave Driver High, and there's going to be an election. There's going to be an election for class president, and there's going to also be a referendum on the same ballot for the all-important question as to whether Taco Tuesdays will remain on Tuesday and stay alliterative, or be moved to Friday. The school administration thinks it'll boost school spirit if they give the kids a little say in something that doesn't matter too much. Let's say that the class has 120 students. All right, so you have 120 eligible voters. Let us also say that there are 2 students who are popular students who have the social connections and kind of the juice, the riz, I think the kids say these days, to be able to pull off being elected class president. And these 2 kids are annoying type A personality grade grubbers who both think that this is going to look really good on their college applications. All right, so these 2 kids, they're just average American kids. We'll give them the names of Chumpy McStumps-a-lot and Stumpy McChumps-a-lot. And these 2 are campaigning for class president, and they couldn't have programs that are more different. McChumps-a-lot is campaigning on an increase in school spirit and the banginest prom season ever, whereas McStumps-a-lot is campaigning on the banginest prom season ever and an increase in school spirit. Just opposite ends of the political spectrum. Now, those 2 kids are expected to do the best. We also have a less popular kid running. His name is Johnny Trenchcoat. Johnny Trenchcoat is a rebel. What's he rebelling against? Well, what do you got, old man? And Johnny has a program that he'd like to push when he's running for class president, which is that there'll be a death metal band playing at the prom, and he would also like, as far as school spirit goes, to see the last teacher hanged with the entrails of the last school counselor. It's election day, and we have a turnout of 100 students. 100 of the 120 students decide that they're going to vote. 20 of the students don't vote. Some of them are absent that day. Some of them are too busy doing other things during their lunch period to be able to vote. And some of the kids think it's a real waste of time, because why should they pick between these 2 stuck-up rich kids so that they can help them with their college transcript when it's not going to make a difference in their personal lives anyway? they've got problems at home, they're going to be leaving school early maybe and going to work at dad's factory. What the hell do they care about some dumb student election? So those kids are not participating. You get 100 votes. Let's say out of the 100 kids who do vote, that all 100 of them vote on Taco Tuesday, because that's something that they feel is going to make change in their life, and it's important to them. And even though it's not the marquee election, student class president is the marquee election, they feel that Taco Tuesday, all 100 kids, is something they feel strong enough about that they're going to vote for it. By the way, Taco Tuesday wins in a landslide. 82 of the kids vote to keep it on Tuesday. It stays alliterative. But you've also got the student class president election going on. How many kids vote for class president? Well, it turns out that you've got 97 kids who vote for class president. So some of them vote for McChumps a lot, some of them vote for McStumps a lot, some of them vote for Johnny Trenchcoat. 3 kids do not have a vote that counts. Those kids are the undervotes. What happened with those kids? Well, it turns out that one of the kids voted for Taco Tuesday, and this kid also thought that he was voting for McChumps a lot, but got confused by the ballot. This kid doesn't read too good, and also found the ballot format to be a little confusing, and the school administrators couldn't really figure out where he was trying to make an X or a check mark, so they don't count the presidential vote, but they count the Taco Tuesday vote. 2 of the kids left President blank intentionally, or perhaps 1 or 2 of them even wrote on the ballot that they think the whole idea of this school spirit election stinks, or worse. So you got a few kids there who have not participated in the presidential election, while they did participate in the Taco Tuesday referendum because they felt that that was more important to them, and or they thought that it was presented on the ballot in a way that was easier to understand and mark. We got it? You're seeing some obvious club you over the head metaphors here, I know, but I wanted to simplify things, simplify some math, and hopefully make this a little bit humorous because it is a dry subject. The school administrators have 2 basic options as to how they can present this data to the local media, to the school newspaper. The Slave Driver Times, which has a faculty advisor who decides ultimately what will and won't get printed, and to the students themselves, to their families, and the community at large. What set of data is going to be provided to everybody to tell us who won class president and the big Taco Tuesday decision? Well, I am going to use my favorite high-tech tool to demonstrate the 2 options here, and that is the lids of pizza boxes. The data that we actually have is that McStumpsalot received 49 of the 100 votes, which is 49% of the vote. McChumpsalot received 47 votes, which is 47% of the vote. 3 of the kids did not cast the presidential ballot, although we know that they did vote. These 3 kids are undervotes. And Johnny Trenchcoat voted for himself. Johnny Trenchcoat is 1 vote, which is 1%. It's possible, and we could argue, it could be a very honest thing to do, although slightly more complex, with some splaining to do for the 3% here, that the school administrators could say, this was your vote, and McStumpsalot won the election with 49 votes, which you will note is not a majority. The school administrators don't necessarily also want to be pushing the idea that you can win an election with a minority of the vote, with the largest plurality of the vote, even though that's exactly what happened, because they've been yammering away in their civics and their history classes about how in a democracy the majority decides things, and the greater number of people decide that the way an election goes. This really would be an obvious mathematical counter to that, and an explanation to kids that life doesn't work out that way a lot of the time. they also would have to explain the undervotes here. You know, what they could be saying here is that there were 49 votes for McStumps-a-lot, 47 votes for McChumps-a-lot, and 3 of the students were either too confused by the election to be able to cast a ballot for president, and or they would have to be able to say that these 3 students have self-actualized fully and realized that they have a world to gain and nothing to lose but their chains. So this is not going to be the narrative. And whether or not Johnny Trenchcoat gets mentioned at all seems to be optional. So, how many votes do we have here? How many votes do we have with the actual full numbers? What would be called the total vote count. Total vote count is 100. There were 100 votes in this rubric. 100 votes. All right, what you're probably going to get reported in the school newspaper, what you're probably going to get reported in the local papers, and if it's a small enough town and it makes it on its way to the local news, what you're going to get reported to the community is that there were no undervotes. That there were no undervotes, but they also have the Taco Tuesday votes. There's 100 Taco Tuesday votes, but you have 97 presidential votes. So to simplify things and to cover over having to explain away a whole series of facts that are uncomfortable, what's going to be reported is that we had 100 votes. We had 100 votes, and then we're going to start talking about percentages. You'll be lucky if you hear anything about Johnny Trenchcoat at all. So you may not hear about Trenchcoat at all, and you're probably just going to hear these 2 statistics. So it was McStumps-a-lot 51%, McChumps-a-lot 48%. The majority has spoken, and it was 100 votes. Well, that is clearly it's a lie. This goes beyond couching the numbers in a certain way. This goes beyond your presentation. This is mixing 2 different sets of numbers. The calculation of the percentage of vote received was done off of 97 votes. The turnout that is going to be reported is the 100 votes because you're also including the turnout for Taco Tuesday. I think that you all see that there is a blunt metaphor here. So, and you know, I tried to make that a little humorous, but what I'm going to do now is, now that you understand that these 3 are the undervotes, and that you understand that the discrepancy between 197 is the difference between the total vote count and a vote count from which the percentages of presidential votes is reported as, and that these 2 things are mixed in a way that doesn't jibe, is not honest. Let us take a little pause here, and I'm going to run through election data in recent decades so you can see using FEC data, you can see what the presidential election results were, including undervotes and not including undervotes, as percentages, and after that we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the whys and the implications. Why, I'll have you know that my ancestors fought and died at Bunker Hill and Iwo Jima so that we would not be able to figure out who won the presidency and then lie to our children about it. If that is the hill that you would like to defend, then go for it. You might be saying, but why are you even bothering with this whole issue of the total that presidential candidates get when that's not the way that the presidency is decided in the United States? Why is that such a big deal for you? We use the Electoral College. Well, my question would be, why is it such a big deal in legacy media? Why is it such a big deal to the two parties? And we know the answer to that. To this point, I've largely talked about undervotes in the context as to how they provide a logistical problem. Undervotes also point to a philosophical issue. We're talking about poli-sci 101 stuff here. We're talking about the consent of the governed. Do these results show that the system is working? I would argue that every single time that legacy media puts out the idea that there was a split of a larger amount of votes than were actually cast for president in a manner which boosts the vote totals as percentages for both major parties, is effectively propaganda for the status quo. It's propaganda for the idea that there is a legitimacy to the proceedings, which perhaps it does not deserve, that there's more of a legitimacy and popularity to the two major parties. And we all know that the big newspapers have their endorsements for president, and we all know that the major TV networks have their preferred candidate who they want to win. We know who CNN and MSNBC want to win, and we know who Fox News and, let's say, OAN want to win. So they're boosting, they're engaged in puffery of the amount of votes that these candidates actually received. There is an entire election industrial complex which needs people to buy into the idea that the system is working currently as it should. Think about the multi-billion-dollar election machine industry, and think about whether or not people want to have a discussion in that industry as to whether or not elections that are being decided by 1 or 2% of the popular vote might not be counting 2 or 3% of the votes of people who bothered showing up. That's not a discussion that they would like to enter into. Think about the pollsters. Think about the whole multi-billion-dollar polling industry serving the RNC and the DNC. These are people who, because they're using numbers, like a lot of people in marketing and advertising, because they're using numbers, they want you to think that they're doing a hard science. They trade in certainty. You're paying them for the peace of mind that you now have a better understanding of what the public is thinking, and you're going to use that to your advantage. Well, undervotes throw a wrench in all of that. For one thing, a lot of the people who are talking to exit pollsters who believe, like the kid who thought that he voted for McChumps a lot when he actually voted for nobody, a lot of those voters are telling the exit pollster that, oh, I voted for this person when in fact they didn't. That's throwing things off some. You would then also have to account for a larger percentage of people who are not persuaded by either of the major party candidates, despite the billions of dollars that are spent selling them as a product. You've got your Coke and your Pepsi, but then you've got unaccounted for people who have either selected RC Cola in the case of third-party candidates, or have decided that they're just going to drink some water because it's better for them. Consider also the RNC and the DNC themselves. They are pushing a product, and they don't really want the impression that that product is less popular than it actually is, or in this case, a more accurate photo that they are as popular as they actually seem to be, which is what the numbers tell us, which is a bit less so than the hype would have you believe. You actually have to include the undervote people in the category of people who didn't show up to vote at all despite being eligible. In fact, the undervote people are a step worse than that. You cannot accuse people who undervote on the presidency of being lazy, of being misinformed. They showed up. These are people who actually voted. They either stood in line for 45 minutes or they filled out a ballot and they put it in the mail. You can't accuse those people of not caring. They voted for lower offices. They just didn't like their presidential choices. They found them to be so disgusting that they couldn't pick one or the other. Well, that's something that people don't necessarily want to discuss. Presenting these false statistics, you get to have talking heads who are spin doctors for the two parties state that when their candidate wins, despite the fact that it may not have been a majority of the vote or barely by the skin of its teeth a majority of the vote, that they have a mandate. You'll hear these words: mandate, mandate to lead, mandate to push forward their political project. Well, it's pretty hard to do so when the winning candidate receives somewhere between 43 and 49% of the vote, as has been the case in most recent elections. And it's also hard to do so, or hard to make a case as to how popular your party is when they finished a few percentage points below that even. You may also be saying, well, I don't really pay much attention to the legacy media any longer. I get my news from social media. I have my certain talking heads that I listen to who aren't in the corporate media. And I would say, well, that's great. But the fact of the matter is that almost every single one of them is using the data from legacy media articles, which continue in 95% of the cases in the most recent elections to report things flat out inaccurately and mix the total turnout and raw voters with percentages that are drawn from a smaller subset of those voters. Most people who are doing any sort of independent media approach to social media do not have the time, do not have the resources, and don't even have the knowledge to know that any of this is happening in order to be reporting anything other than the numbers that they saw in that article in the New York Times or the Guardian, or that they pulled from Fox News or CBS. If you're saying, well, you still haven't gotten around to talking about the Electoral College, oh, we could do that. That makes things far worse than the picture that I just gave you. Because, of course, using the Electoral College for a presidential election, you do not have one contest for president. You have over 50. You have 48 states in which the winner of that state takes the entirety of that state's slate of Electoral College votes. And you have 2 states in Maine and Nebraska in which things are at least partially split by congressional district. And then you have Washington, D.C. So you actually have more than 50 contests for president. And in every one of those 50 contests, you have undervotes in every single one of them. Looking at data from the 2024 election, the most recent one, the state with the lowest total of undervotes was Arkansas, in which 0.62% of Arkansas residents were undervotes, either because the ballot or the machine confused them or didn't count their vote, or because they didn't like the 2 major options and decided that they were going to withhold their presidential vote. The highest was Alaska. Alaska had nearly 6% of the state voting via undervote. 5.94% of Alaskans did not cast a vote for president, whether intentionally or not, in the 2024 election. The other states are somewhere in between. Interestingly, there were more undervotes in the state of California than there were votes in Montana total, to give you some idea. In California, 3.85% of the state did not cast a vote for president, whether intentionally or not. That's over 634,000 people. You might well be asking, well, does this affect state races and therefore the national race as we tally electoral college votes? Oh, hell yeah, it does. In 2000, famously, Florida had a 2.3% undervote rate, at least that we know of. It looks like so many things were wrong in the Florida election that year that we may never get a total picture of what happened. But according to the official data, George W. Bush beat Al Gore by 537 votes. Well, Florida that year had 137,793 undervotes. Do we think that may have made some difference? In 2000, same year in New Mexico, there was a 1.6% rate of undervotes, and we were told that Al Gore beat George W. Bush there by 366 votes. The undervotes were over 4,500, and even that I am reading as an estimate. Why are these estimates? How do we not know? In Michigan in 2016, Donald Trump is, in the official data, said to have beaten Hillary Clinton by 10,704 votes. Michigan had an undervote rate of 1.8%, which is over 87,000, almost 88,000 voters, which is almost 9 times that amount. In 2020 in Arizona, we are told that Joe Biden beat Trump by 10,457 votes. There was a 0.96% undervote rate in Arizona in 2020, which is over 32,000 votes, or more than 3 times the gap between those two candidates. And you could see very close totals time and time again. And I keep seeing things. Wisconsin 2016 estimated 25,000 undervotes with a margin between Trump and Clinton of 22,700. Why again an estimate? Pennsylvania 2016, 50,000 undervotes, 0.8%, with a 44,292 Trump over Clinton margin. We see Georgia in 2020, Wisconsin 2020, Pennsylvania 2020. This is over and over again. So if this is the result of the voting machines not working, or even worse, of the voting machines working, if this is the result of people deciding that they're disgusted with the 2 major candidates and sitting it out, any way you look at it, this is not a healthy, vibrant approach to picking the unitary executive, especially in a political culture in which Congress backs away and allows the presidency to do more and more as they do less and less, no matter what that old rag, the U.S. Constitution, has to say about things. Are there other ways of going about this? Well, there certainly are. It turns out I looked internationally because, of course, the United States Constitution does allow itself to be amended. The founders and framers of the Constitution built that into the process. 87 other countries have a presidency that matters, in which the president actually does something beyond ceremonial functions, doesn't just wear a sash, but actually has some real powers. Sometimes this is in a system that looks something like the United States with a parliamentary body, and sometimes that parliamentary body also produces a prime minister, so that you have a sharing, a cohabitation between a prime minister and a presidency. But either way, doesn't really matter. There are other systems out there, and really very few countries do presidential elections in which you could win with under 50% of the vote. That's fairly rare. What most countries do is they have a runoff system in which, if none of the candidates manage to hit the 50% plus 1 vote threshold, you then have another election a week or 2 later in which the top 2 finishing candidates are the only candidates on the ballot, and people pick between those 2 so that one of them definitely wins at least 50%. In some countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, the threshold is higher than the 50% not to trigger a runoff. It could be 55%. In some countries, including many in Africa, that threshold is 60% on a first ballot that you would need to stave off the 2-candidate runoff in a second round of election. Very interesting to me that in some countries, especially in Latin America, you get a floating percentage in which, let's say, that somebody wins 49% of the vote. All right. They would then have to win at least 10% more of the vote than the second place finisher. That is a system that you could amend the U.S. Constitution to have, in which case every individual would get 1 vote that was worth 1 vote. And that would have some very interesting impacts. All of a sudden, for example, a lot of the power of the pollster would go away. I'm from Philadelphia, and pollsters are extremely interested in what soccer moms between the ages of 30 and 44 in parts of two very specific Pennsylvania counties think about certain issues because Pennsylvania is a swing state. Those are the swing counties, and that is a swing demographic. So pollsters and the parties are tailoring their messaging, tailoring policy at the end of the day to what they think these people think. They're not so concerned about what, let's say, an African American living in Harlem thinks, because they figure, New York's going to go blue anyway, so we don't really care to ask you about what you think about specific issues. If you're a white male who has 2.3 kids and goes to church regularly in Utah, they're also not going to ask you what you think about specific issues, because they figure you live in a red state, the state's going that way anyway, what are you going to do? Vote for a different party? We'd like to see you try. We're working the Electoral College, we're gaming it, and we don't really care what most of you think about most things most of the time. Well, there's a tight little bow to put around a nasty little gift under your Christmas tree. I hope that whatever holiday that you are celebrating this season, that you do enjoy it, and I hope I've given you some things to chew on there. This is Chris once again. If you did enjoy the video, I hope that you like and subscribe, and I will be back soon with more ignored facts. Take it easy, folks.